Ryan, how is Jeremiah Carnell feeling, and do you expect that they'll play this week?
Yeah, our policy is that we don't discuss specifics on injuries, and then once you start going down a little bit here, a little bit there, um, you can create a problem. And so, for a number of reasons, we don't discuss those things. We put out the report the day of the game, and but I can tell you that they're in great spirits. The medical staff is working hard. We'll um, take it day to day and see how they come in each day. But they're working hard to get back in the field. And just so you understand, we check in every day. We take the advice of the medical staff and use their feedback, and we go from there. So we'll continue to do that.
For right guard, how did he grade out? He played a lot of snaps. Yeah, and said, how did he play?
Solid. I mean, that was his first kind of real action, and I thought there was good snaps there. And you can see the talent, you can see the bend, you can see the power. He looks like he belongs. So now he's gonna, start stacking some games here.
Well, when you were dealing with Saturday night, Julian was a little bit limpy, gimpy, looked like at times. I don't know if he got hurt or whatever. How much does that potentially impact what he looks like on the field? Somebody who's seen this and stuff. If I figure out it's throw the ball before than used to, use your right foot and your foot on some of the team that you were playing, but how much impact does that have on any game for him?
Um, I guess it can just depend on what's going on, on each individual play. Um, so I think it's hard to say exactly how much anything like that had an effect on him. But um, yeah, I mean, when you look at certain plays, there's a lot that goes into it. And so I can't specifically say, what percentage or anything like that. When you start to look at, um, we had maybe some guys in the game that hadn't had as many reps. There's not as much chemistry there. They'll work, hard to continue to build on that. There's a lot of things that come into play. So, um, but at the end of the day, we got to do our job.
Ryan, you mentioned Jeremiah had a nagging thing, and he took that nasty hit against Illinois where he kind of got flipped over. Is there anything lingering from that particular play that's been bothering?
Not that I know of. Yeah.
And did he do anything in that game on Saturday to further uh, uh, complicate or injure what would have made him initially a game to
Not that I know of.
Back in the spring, you and the other players talking about they wanted to take some of the signs and everything down. Just kind of wanted to move on from last year and those successes and clear their own path here and get their own situations. I know it's about positives last season and whatnot, but philosophically, can that apply to some of the negatives of the last couple of years of these guys having they don't have the success of they also don't have necessarily the war rules that a lot of those guys have.
I don't know. I just know that we have to continue to focus on right now, um, and that's it. And there's lessons that can be learned from the past, but at the end of the day, it comes down to everybody doing their job and just staying focused right now. And that's it. And I think it's a job as the coaches to be at our best. It's a job of the players to be at their best right now. And we'll use, what's happened in the past as learning lessons. But at the end of the day, the majority of that stuff doesn't have an effect on this team in particular. Everyone, and this team is unique. We have our own journey, our own process that we're looking to master every week, and that's really what it comes down to. So, um, you know, this is their story, and I say it all the time, the pen's in your hand, and here we are, like we're in it right now. What do you want the story to be? Each team and each year, there's its own story. So, um, I think again, we learn from the past, but ultimately we have to focus on what's right now.
With Carnell, you mentioned he thought maybe you were going to play that you needed to, and was there a setback or anything since then that has changed the penalties?
Again, I don't want to get into everything because once I start answering one question, then it leads to something else. So I don't want to comment any of that stuff.
Coach, you're saying you will be playing your best ball here in November. Just thoughts on this week's game and that was your senior day.
Yeah. Well, for our seniors, these games go fast, and we talk every year about how quickly these games go. And here we are, last game in the shoe, in the regular season, and it's important for everyone to play with urgency. But I say all the time, don't wait till the last game to start feeling all the emotion of that. Like that's a buildup all year long, and being in the moment and appreciating that. But for the guys who uh, playing their last game in the shoe, it's a big deal, and we need to celebrate those guys by everybody in the Woody giving everything we have and playing for them. And I know they're going to put everything they have into this game because um, there's a lot of great memories on that field, a lot of great memories, in the Woody and spending time on the practice field and all of those things. And when you get a chance to reflect, it just makes you realize how important finishing this season is the right way. Yeah, sure. So, they always put pressure on you in all three phases. It starts with special teams and then goes to offense and defense. And, they always have a plan of how they want to attack you, and they play complementary football. So, coming off of a win and a bye week, so we got to be on our game.
Your defense is forcing so many 3-and-outs and short possessions, the last 2 weeks especially, that they're barely on the field. 37, 44 snaps. It That's not leaving a ton for the starters or the backups. Are you having to change, or are you changing anything with practice to try and get them more reps? Are they playing too good right now?
No, they're not. Um, but I think it's good in terms of the freshness of our team. So that part's been good, and we practiced physically. The offense been on the field for more the last couple of weeks. I think we've had over 70 rushes the last 2 weeks, and so it's been good. It's been solid. Guys are getting those reps, but that's why we practice so hard during the week. But once you get to this part of the season, we got to be smart what we do and make sure guys are fresh. And when you look at the snap count on defense, you can see why our guys are, seeking contact this time of year.
Right. We see this is team. See him on the day.
Well, it started right from we walked in the building, and he continues to put that time and effort in and makes extra time to connect with the players and communicate with the staff. And because of that, there's trust. And I think when you come in as a new coordinator with, really the team in place, the coaching staff in place, I mean, you're kind of on your own. He brought in, a couple guys, but for the most part, he came in by himself, and he was able to connect with everybody early on. And that's how you have an impact early, is you build trust. And there's only one way to do that. That's spend time with your guys, and he's done that. And so I think, we've seen preparation, you've seen some confidence on the field, you've seen guys when, again, there hasn't been a whole lot of adversity this year, but when it has hit, there's been guys who get to the sideline, solve the problem, and get it fixed quickly, get back on the field without panic. I think that's because, they know when they turn to him and they turn to the coaching staff, they're going to give them answers on what exactly happened, and then go get it fixed.
Sensitive on their bill with
Um, every year is different. Yeah, just the personality is different. We lost a whole lot of personalities on defense last year, and a whole lot of production, and a whole new group of guys came in, and so because there was just so much movement between the players, the coordinator, it was just a totally different feel and dynamic, but all within the culture of a program, and so again, I don't know how to compare other than it's just different.
when you look at James Peters, he came into this year kind of high expectations, things didn't go the way he wanted out of the game. Let's conversation been like and just seeing kind of that moment Saturday and kind of those things.
Well, I think this is another one of our younger running backs that hasn't, you know, reached his potential yet. I think you're seeing his work ethic and his mindset really change as the season's gone on. Maybe not change, but just, um, really develop, in my opinion. You can see it when he's on the field. You can see the way he's practicing, and that's kind of where it starts. No, it doesn't start there. It starts with a mindset, then it starts with how you practice, and then all of a sudden shows up in the game. And now you're starting to see him really run downhill. You're seeing him break tackles, and now he's starting to really, show what he can do. And I still think there's a lot left for James. But to your point, he stayed with it. He hasn't let anything get in the way and discourage him, which is great. And because of that, now he's starting to play his best football. We need him the most.
Now, then, this might just be the thing that this might be a thing too, but we're not talking about that like that.
We have meetings during bye weeks and communicate with guys and their sphere of influence and try to help them the best they can to prepare them so it doesn't all just come at them at the end of the year. So they can stay focused on what matters most, and that's what's playing. Um, but right now, it's all about football.
I'm sure we'll change with the status of this week with the some of the game and some of you that want to do play for reserve and we'll take three guys there for down the slide.
Right. We want to keep it to two, but I guess if the snap count got really high, we could do that. But we probably want to keep it to two guys.
What is it about Rutgers' ability to block balls? I've seen it. They had lots of games before.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this. It's coming up there.
They put a ton of pressure on you, and and that's felt by everybody. I think when you look at even last week when we put some pressure at the end of the half, the punter could obviously feel that and didn't maybe kick it exactly how he wanted, which led to I think the fact that the ball was blocked. The punt was blocked. So I think it's a mindset that they're going to apply pressure, and that's their philosophy. Everyone has their own philosophy, and they do a great job of it, man. Those guys give great effort, and so we got to be on our game.
Ryan, regarding recruiting, this last few years, we reminder when met the fact that just wasn't enough senior film. They didn't get to evaluate enough senior film. Now with NIL, the coaching carousel, you've seen you guys pick up 7 seniors this month. How has all of everything going on impacted your ability to evaluate seniors now?
Well, that was our philosophy coming into the season. Was that for a lot of reasons we wanted to be able to identify um, the guys who really played well their senior year, and then use that as an evaluation tool, maybe even more than we had in the past. And one of the biggest reasons is because these are truly investments now, and in terms of resources, and we have to make sure that we're right in what we're doing. These decisions are more and more important. So um, the more information you have, um, you know, certainly it helps make every decision clear. Um, and that's what we're looking to do. So as many times as we can evaluate a recruit, and figure out if this is somebody who's going to work here, because it's not about winning signing day. It's about them coming here and having success. If they have success, we have success. If they fail, we fail. And so this is a relationship that has to be on both ends. And we also want to make sure that there's guys that fit our culture and want to be here. So all those things come into play when you're looking to sustain a certain level over a period of time.
Well, by the fluidity of the sport right now.
I mean, I think it's just the way that it is in terms of, like you said, the NIL, obviously there's been coaching changes, and, we're trying to adapt every year and do what's best for that year. It's like, you have to look at it, from a wider lens, but then every once in a while you got to look and see, okay, here are the changes that are going on. Now there's one transfer portal. Um, all those things are taken into consideration. Um, you look at how, some of the guys are playing. Are there guys who are going to go to the NFL and leave early now? Maybe we didn't know if they were going to before the season. So we try to adapt the best we can and then predict the best we can and forecast what it's going to look like. And that's what roster management's all about right now. So I know stability is, more important than ever right now. And we have to make sure we're doing our part to bring in the right people.
Talked earlier about this team being really focused on right now. And he's talking about the routine throughout the year, but not doing the same thing and doing the same thing, doing the same thing. Has this team handled that better than maybe some we've seen in the past? And how much has it helped, whether it's this week about not overlooking our opponent or week one when there was a massive opponent, not to get too much of that opponent? Like, how much has routine helped this team and have they handled that better than some in the past?
I don't know how to compare them to previous teams, but they're very businesslike. Um, Good look in their eye when they come in the building. Good look in their eye on the sideline before the game, when they're in the game. I think they know how serious this is and our obligation to do our job. And I think it's all about the process and doing a great job from Sunday all the way to Saturday. And if we can focus on that part of it and not the result, not the opponent, then we'll have a chance to continue to build, because if you keep getting better at your process and then you keep using the game as feedback, when you get to the end of the season, you're going to do the same thing that week. That's it. We're not going to change. And so we're trying to master that the best we can here and stay focused and stay locked in. And that's it. Like, all the other stuff doesn't matter. It's about like, how do I focus on doing my job and doing my part uh, on the team and keeping all the distractions out of the way because we know they're out there and we can't be naive to that. So, but it's one thing to say, it's another thing for guys to listen and buy in. And right now they are, but it's week to week, as you know.
So, I mean, you can convince themselves, so he had meetings with you, you have no doubt, just give them. Watch, take them, let them take off. Obviously, everybody knows about the player meeting, but after, or, I wish I don't like you, taking your side, I've never a lot of support, also players. I feel like that's what, really, it's program for.
Well, I mean, I feel like communication, and just like any type of relationship, any type of organization, everybody will tell you communication's very important. But sometimes coaches are the most uncoachable people. Somebody that I know back home told me that, and they're right. So, we have to be able to listen. And we don't always have to agree, but we have to create an environment where someone feels like they can speak freely and give you their feedback. And if there's high levels of trust, then there can be those types of conversations. And so, um, knowing what's going on in the minds of our players is critical. And then having ownership, knowing that they're being heard, I think does make a difference. They understand the hierarchy, they know how it works, but it's also good to be heard and challenged. And as a coach, it's okay to concede a point. And I think you can't let your ego get in the way. You got to do what's best for the organization.
When I really building in specific, it's just sort of for the record. Walk us through every one ball, how that plays out in the game during the week.
In terms of a game,
We're going to week, like, does the athlete have the final say? It's brain in a game, then during the week.
in terms of like as we get closer to the game, if someone's available or not. Yeah. So the medical staff each day gives a report on how someone's doing, whether they're in practice, full go, limited or out. And then kind of gives an update on how things are going. And then as we get closer to the game, it's available, unavailable, or questionable. Game time decision. And so we just go off of that. And certainly the communication between the players and the medical staff is important in terms of making those decisions.
Player didn't want to be slowly in play. He has final strength.
Of course, yeah. Everyone's feedback is taken into consideration, and that's where again, when you talk about trust within an organization, all those things come into play, and it's a group effort. But certainly, we always take into consideration, the student athletes and how they're feeling, and all those things. Yeah.
We're in a new area. You've told me before, like more games. If you foresee the day where slow management will become something where it's not playing them in a game, or I know you're repping fewer reps. Like, you see this playing out.
I think a part of it is like the season, and then a part of it would be how you practice during the week, and then, where somebody is within their season. And so we get a lot of good information from sports science compared to previous years and try to do the best we can. But we also have to win, every game. And so that's the balance. But I feel like, here, when you look at last year, when you look at how we've handled things, I think we're in a pretty good place. But we're always chasing it and trying to do what's best for our guys.
Right. Obviously, you guys don't quite big of a single class per 4 years this year. But 4 times like to be yeah. Well, 9 people. That's what Steve.
And I think it's interesting because when you look at last year's team and how many guys came back, um, you kind of recognize that once they walked out, we were going to have sort of a gap in there. That's just kind of how it works when someone, um, decides to come back for their fourth and fifth year. Sometimes there's no room for some players, and so that, they decide maybe to move on or whatever it might be. So we knew there was going to kind of be a year where we didn't have as many older seniors. Um, but I think the leadership of even the juniors and even some sophomores has been excellent because they've been kind of thrust into those roles, as you've seen. And so, it isn't just about, your ranking that gives you leadership. It's about your impact and influence on others. And I think, you're seeing some really great leadership. When guys speak, the guys around them listen. Um, and I think there's just a matter of fact about this group. There's not a lot of drama. They know what they need to do. They show up and they make guys around them better. And that approach so far has worked. We got to keep it going.
Right, similar to what Rob was asking, but when you have a guy who maybe could play, but you think, okay, maybe this isn't the best for the long-term goals that we're talking about. Whether they would be on the field, how does that side of the conversation go when maybe you guys are saying this isn't probably the best idea and the player wants to be out there? Take us through that.
Yeah, every situation's different, but at the end of the day, it's our job to make sure that we're one giving great information, and then two, you know, looking out for what's best for the guys. And that's really, the best I can say it. But there's always a lot of variables and a lot that goes into every situation. And so we try to do the best we can again to communicate and do what's best to work for our guys.
Ryan, you're talking about what the medical staff does during the week with them. Guys are limited. And whatever. At this point in the year, I'm sure there's a bunch of guys who have physical issues. It's a violent sport. How much do guys need practice during the week in order to play on Saturday? Can you be pretty limited during the week, especially if you're a veteran, and be okay on Saturday to play?
Yeah, I think it depends on what, you know, soreness guys have or what injuries maybe they are, and what position. I think all those things come into consideration. And like you said, you know, on a day like today, that we're going to have good on good. We're going to have scout periods. We're going to have indie periods. And so based on what they're dealing with, like we'll adapt we've done that for years. We adapt that practice based on how they're doing. Like full go is full go. Then you have limited, and then you have, just indie. And so based on what they're dealing with, let's just say it's a shoulder, they're not going to be involved in special teams drills or snagging guys to the ground or, whatever the drills might be. So, the medical staff does a great job of making sure they present that to us at our 9 o'clock meetings every morning so that we can plan ahead for practice.
Since the Texas game, you've won every game by at least 18 points. This is a great problem to have close calls, but every other team in the country has. Is there a part of you that wishes that you had faced that kind of adversity? And I don't can answer this, but what are you doing to try to simulate that so that when you do get in those games, you're ready?
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it's like trying to worry about things that are out of your control, and it's sort of a waste of time. However, I think I mentioned to you that, we were trying to raise the level of play in terms of a 83% grade, which is hard to do. And just so everybody understands, like even that 3% can be a big deal. It could come down to one play in a matchup game. And so, the intensity is high. It's the coach's job to make sure everybody in the building is locked in. It's my job to make sure the coaches are locked in. And it's the position coach's job to make sure that their units are locked in and doing their job. And on our game. And then, practice has got to be good too. I mean, that we can't just expect it, not be physical in practice and not go, good on good because, we're going to need that to keep our edge. And so all those things are taken into consideration, but we don't take anything for granted. We don't take we don't make any assumptions. And like every week, every Saturday, an opportunity to get to Indianapolis on the line. That's the way it is here right now. I mean, we want to get to Indy, and we haven't got to Indy here. There's nobody on this team that's been to Indy right now, and they know it. And so, like that's the edge. You wake up in the morning every day looking to reach our goals. So, whoever we play, we play. This is going to be a great challenge this week. We know that, and we just watch across college football every week, and you just see, different teams, challenging each other, and we got to do our part. So we can't worry about what we can't control. And you've heard me say that before. I know it sounds boring, but it's the truth. We got to worry about what we can control.
You've talked about the edginess of the team. Do you think that will serve you well when you get into that situation? And that's a reason you're not so worried about this?
I'm worried about everything. It's just the way I am. It's a coach's so life. He just is always trying to figure out what's next and trying to predict and forecast the best you can. And but I love our guys. I love the edginess. I love the competitiveness. And here we are. I mean, you look at that schedule right there. We only got 2 more in that schedule. And so if you said we're 10-0, rocking right now, I'd say let's go play. And so we're here. And so we got to be at our best. Everybody in the building.
Coach,
You worry about everything. It's just, the running game is seeing improvement. When you watch the film this week, I know it's not 100% what you want, but how did you feel about the running game after watching this game versus previous weeks?
I mean, I thought there was a lot of physicality. I see Carson Hinsman had 9 knockdowns in the game. I mean, it's hard to knock a trash can down 9 times. You know, like that's a heck of a job. I thought guys were finishing downfield. There's some clips of guys finishing people out of bounds. Running backs are running through contact. People are finishing. It was a good Sunday to watch effort and physicality and fundamentals because we know that's going to matter in the end. Yeah, there was some 83% for sure. Again, I don't want to get into it all, but yeah. And some of those guys were in the O-line, which, there's nowhere to hide in the offensive line unless maybe there's a naked or a quick screen or something like that. But other than that, like you're graded to a high level. And Coach Bowen is very particular and critiques those guys at a high level. And so there were some guys who graded out, which is not easy to do. So credit to them and their preparation. And now we got to do it again.
And just shifting gears back to high school, in the state of Ohio, they're voting to possibly bring NIL to high school football. Just your thoughts on how that could impact the sport for high school and college, bring NIL down there.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at where the rest of the nation is, I think, we'll let the people who make the decisions. But I think across the country, you're seeing become pretty standard. And so I think if we would have said this about 10 years ago, I think all of us would have been like, no way. But here we are. We're in this phase, and I can see it obviously benefiting the student athletes, which ultimately is a great opportunity for them.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just zeroing in on one. After the game Saturday night, Brandon Ennis said he's seen a look in your eye after, last year after the meeting and stuff that got everything straight. But that look is still there. When you look in the mirror right now, what do you see staring back at you from the standpoint of what just has changed about your demeanor that's carrying through?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's every year, every game you learn, you try to grow, you try to get better, you try to recognize the things that need to get done to do your job. We all have an obligation, and yeah, I mean, just surround yourself with great people and go as far as you possibly can and push, and that's it. Um, and so, no, I mean, I can't sit here. I tell you, I know any different how I act or anything like that based on week to week. I try to be as consistent as I can, and try to push the guys and try to give them as much information as I can on what's coming next and forecast what that week needs to look like and where we're going with the season and trying to put the guys in the best position to be successful. That's it. And I think the one thing that these guys can recognize is that there's a lot of buy-in. They know that, if you buy into what we're doing, if you believe in what you're doing, you're going to see the results. And that's important. And I think everybody in the building feels that way when they walk into Woody. And that's a good sign for a leader. But again, like it's week to week. We got to keep bringing it.
All guys before a game, like you said, you look into their eyes, you see that. What's the telltale sign there?
I think eyes lead to the soul, man. Look at someone's eyes, you know exactly what's going on. And that mindset starts with how you look. And someone told me that, and I agree with it. And so you can tell exactly, what you're dealing with when you look somebody in the eye. And, I watch a sideline, I watch the TV copies, I watch everything just to see what the look in everybody's eye is. And I think when you look at our guys, there's a certain business about them, and